Welcome. Well, folks, we have the trade deadline just a few short days away. Are the Mets going to make a move for a new center fielder? Luis Roberts has been in the news as of late. Or are they going after another frontline starter? Guys like Sandy Alcantara has been rumored at nauseum the last couple of days as well. So you know what? If you're a New York Mets fan and you are focused on how this team is playing and what's to come in the next couple of days, how could you not be ecstatic? Because this team right now is positioned in a perfect position, perfect at 62 wins right now. And if you calculate it, and I always do this, what is it going to take for the Mets to get to 90 wins? And all they would virtually have to do is play 500 ball at 28 and 28. You know, folks, I feel we're going to play a lot better than that. The New York Mets just coming off a phenomenal weekend, sweeping the San Francisco Giants. And you know what? Watching that series was very beneficial because it kind of showed you what the Mets kind of could be, what the Mets still need, and I think that is so important, right? Take today's game, Kodai Senga, at points of the game, locating, not the best, but he was able to make big pitches early on. Yes, he did give up some key hits. Matt Chapman, homer, let up a couple of runs, more than normal, 3 earned runs. Bullpen had to come in, and you know what? That's where we see our opportunity. The bullpen, as we know, has been taxed. Gregory Soto move, freaking phenomenal, especially when you assess the trade market. Not a lot of sellers out there. Not a lot of sellers. And the New York Mets to get virtually, arguably, their top need, a left-hander out of the bullpen a week before the trade deadline, when all these other teams in the buying market, you gotta give a round of applause for David Stearns. You really do. And checking that need off of the list so early on has really got to take pressure off Stearns just a bit. Now we can focus on getting that extra starting pitcher, getting possibly another reliever, righty, out of righty, and there are more righties available than lefties. So you could focus on that and getting that center fielder. Because as we know, that upgrade at center field is very important. And if you upgrade at center field, putting Tyrone Taylor to the fourth outfielder, again, as we've mentioned in the past, also upgrades that position as well. All right, folks. So we're going to talk about some important highlights, what happened in today's game, and we're going to talk about the trades because there has been obviously a lot of speculation. Luis Roberts, that was the big one, and the rumors are that the Chicago White Sox are focused on Mark Vientos. So you just hearing that, how are we feeling? How are we feeling? Would you center or trade around Mr. Mark Vientos? Okay, so we're going to assess that. We'll plug that in baseball trade values and see. I want to see if it even makes sense in terms of that. Then Alcantara, Sandy Alcantara. There are other targets as well, but you know what? I want to put in a couple mock trades that I've heard with Sandy Alcantara. The last one I think I heard on SNY, Sproat and Gilbert, Drew Gilbert for a Sandy Alcantara. So we'll assess that as well. Okay, now also, and I've asked this weeks and weeks ago, what is the priority right now? Like, would you put center fielder as our biggest need? Would you put reliever or would you put starting pitcher? And some may even have an upgrade at third base. And that's where I want to actually kind of really, and this is why I think David Stearns is very smart. Ronnie Mauricio, we got to talk, folks. We have to talk. There were rumors and some trades involving Mauricio. There is no way right now, no way that you can trade this man. There is no way. Through 90 at bats this year, you have seen glimpses of a superstar going 4 for 4 today. And, he is just hitting his stride. I can really see him as the next big player. We got screwed a couple years ago trading away a PCA. Ronnie Mauricio has that elite ability. He can run, he can field, he has power, pop, plays premium position, can play a premium position in the infield. But, if you don't have him at short because you have Lindor, the guy plays an awesome third base. Certainly better than Mark Vientos and better than Brett Beatty as well. So you have an upgrade there defensively, and you have elite tools that we've seen that have been on display. And how much does that beef up the end of the lineup? Today was a perfect example. You see Francisco Alvarez starting to finally get into his groove. Francisco Alvarez is swinging the bat much, much, much better, and I'm super happy to see that. And Francisco Alvarez and Ronnie Mauricio batting 8 and 9. How much better does that make the bottom of the lineup? You saw him in the third and the fifth inning. That's when the game started off, when we started off offensively. And, Francisco Alvarez is going with the pitch up the middle in the third inning, in the fifth inning, going oppo. That's what we were missing from Francisco Alvarez last year and early this year. He was pulling his head off the ball. He was swinging for the fences. Now, going down to the minor leagues and raking before he came up, got his confidence back, got his swing back. And I'm so happy for that because Francisco Alvarez is one of those key guys. Not only do the pitchers like him, not only does, he help with that, helps with, his ERA catching as opposed to him not catching. The pitcher's ERA has always traditionally been lower when he is behind the plate. And that says a lot about Francisco. It also says about what the pitchers think about Francisco. But Francisco, when he was coming up, he was known for his bat. He was known for his power, his explosiveness. And I think, he got, because of injuries, he really got out of whack. So the New York Mets and David Stearns, they know that it's really not about how the Mets were playing in early to mid-June. It really wasn't. It's about setting yourself, and I'm going to continue to say this ad nauseum, setting yourself in best position to make that long playoff run and to ultimately win a World Series. Now, again, all these trades right now are going to be setting ourselves up. I heard the other day some people upset about some of the prospects that we gave up for Gregory Soto. Honestly, that's laughable. Those prospects weren't going to help the New York Mets if they stayed with the club for 2 to 3 years. You are a team that is going to win now. In 2 to 3 years, you will develop a whole slew of other prospects. In fact, David Stearns and the New York Mets are setting themselves up to be almost like a factory. You have to be able to develop these chips, these prospects, so that they can come up through the system. But the prospects that don't, that doesn't mean you're not going to develop. It doesn't mean you're not going to tout them, but you can and will deal them off at the deadline to improve your major league club, your major league team. So I think the Mets right now, throughout time, as time passes more, they're going to have more and more. They're going to have themselves in a better and better shape to have more and more chips. I think that they've done a good job thus far in the very short term drafting and developing the existing kids. Right now in the top 23 in the New York Mets farm system, you have 11 pitchers. So, that's something that's pretty new. And I believe there's 4 pitchers in the top 10. And in fact, I think on most rankings, 3 out of the top 5 top prospects or pitchers. Obviously, you have Jonah Tong. He's up there. So, the New York Mets have done a very good job developing their pitchers. And eventually we are going to see these guys. Eventually you're going to see the top echelon pitching prospects, but Stearns is sticking to a plan. He's sticking to a plan. So right now, how are we going to solidify this team as being that top contender? I believe last year, David Stearns made his evaluation on this team. What is that team ceiling? What is the team ceiling? And I don't think in any reality he believed we were a World Series team. Obviously you want to put your best foot forward, but frankly, after his best move in terms of acquiring a starting pitcher, and we needed starting pitching last year after losing Kodai Senga. We needed another starting pitcher, and you went after a number 6 starter in Paul Blackburn. That tells me he believed our ceiling wasn't where it is this year. This year, with the road, and when I say road, I'm talking about the field. Folks, look at the field. Look at the freaking field. Who would the Mets have to go through? First in the National League. First in the National League, we'll assess that. Nobody is a juggernaut team in all of MLB. Let's just get that on the table. There is not 1, 2, 3 teams where I'm saying, all right, this is going to be tough because at the end of the day, we're going to have to go through Atlanta. Folks, Atlanta, for all you who are Atlanta fans, and probably not many Atlanta fans are watching a Mets podcast, especially when the Mets are doing good and Atlanta is just crap in the bed. Atlanta is 17 games behind the Mets right now. That's kind of unbelievable. And I said that the Mets, for them to get 90 wins, they would have to go 28-28. For Atlanta to get 90 wins, they would have to go 46-12. 46-12 just to get to 90 games. And, probably to get to a playoff spot, a wild card spot, you got to win at least 88. So, let's just say they would have to go 44-14. So, bottom line, Atlanta has to be a seller. If you're Atlanta, you got to start dealing off Ozuna. You got to start dealing off all of your chips, especially expiring contracts. And so if you're a Mets fan, that's probably the one team where you're like, I don't want to face. And for everyone else saying the Dodgers, folks, the Dodgers, yes, they have individual talent, but the Dodgers are nowhere near as good as people made them out to be in the beginning of the season. Nowhere near. They've got age, they've got injuries, and talent-wise, I like the talent on the New York Mets. Yes, Shohei Ohtani is a superstar, Mookie Betts, but you know what, folks? I'm not afraid of the Dodgers at all. I am not, especially the way the New York Mets are building this team. Okay, so again, what is going to get us to that World Series, confident to be a World Series team? Right now, we're on a 7-game winning streak. We're 62-44, and we are a game and a half ahead of the Philadelphia Phillies. Thank you. Finally, the freaking Yankees, they beat the Phillies. So good. But here's the deal, folks. I'm going to say this. My number one priority, we needed a lefty out of the pen. Got that. Check mark. I believe we need an upgrade in center field, but I also believe, and this is wholeheartedly, we need another starting pitcher. And, and again, you base it on the ceiling, and we need another starting pitcher who is going to be a top 2, top 3. So top of the rotation starting pitcher. And let's just go over it. Let's just go over the simple facts here. Let's go over the simple facts. And let me just get you the exact reasoning. Okay, so obviously we can bring up the young kids at some point, some of our top prospects, but I don't want the success of kids, of top prospects, for that to hinge, their success to hinge on our playoff hopes, or in terms of us going deep. So if you look at our roster right now, our rotation, it's it's okay, but again, is it set up to make that deep run? Let's take David Peterson for instance. The All-Star David Peterson, 7-4, 2.83 ERA. So he's doing phenomenal. He is doing phenomenal. But folks, let's just I'm going to tell you this straight up. Last year he threw 121 innings. 121 innings. You know what he's at this year? 121 innings. Do you know what 121 innings is signifies? Last year was the most innings David Peterson threw in his entire career. So, I mean, if the guy gets tired in late August, early September when he's close to 200 innings, would that surprise me? No, it wouldn't. It really wouldn't. So you're going to be asking David Peterson to go well past his career high. Before last year, when he threw 121 innings, it was 111 in 2023, 105 in 2022, and 66 in 2021. So each year, the good thing is he's been increasing it incrementally. This year, it's going to be a large ask. All right, so first, David Peterson, your all-star, he's going to have to go monumentally past his career high. Next guy up, we have Clay Holmes. And, Clay Holmes has done phenomenal in terms of what you got him here for. He is 9-5, 3.4 ERA. But the facts with him, we all know he was a reliever, a converted reliever. He's at 113 innings. His career high in innings was 63. So he's already almost doubled that, right? So these two guys already, Peterson and Holmes, are going to go well past their career highs. Then you go to Kodai Senga, and Kodai Senga, it's kind of almost good that he had a month off to recover from the injury. Well, it's never good when a guy has an injury, let's be clear. But the fact is he only threw 5 innings last year. He only threw 5 innings. So in terms of ramping it up innings-wise, he's going to go well past what he did last year. Well past, and I believe his career high innings-wise is, let me just double check. But again, even if the season they tie what they did for their career, now we're going to be asking them to go in the postseason. So Kodai Senga, his first year, he threw 166 innings, right? So you figure with the playoffs and with the rest of this year, he's going to be somewhere around 166 plus innings. But again, he's coming off a season where he threw 5 innings, right? Now, your last 2 pitchers are Montas and Manaea. Manaea is coming off. He's still being ramped up. I think he'll be okay. And Montas is coming off that injury, and he's still being ramped up. So, again, you're going to be asking a lot of your pitchers that are in your starting 5 right now, and this is the starting 5 that the New York Mets plan to have in the beginning of the year. These guys, you're asking them to pitch well more than possibly you wanted them to, because that's why you had the Tyler McGill in the beginning of the year. That's why you had the Paul Blackburns and the rest of, the many pitchers. You were supposed to use those guys to supplement guys like Kodai Senga, guys like Clay Holmes, guys that you think couldn't go well past their particular innings limit that you set. Now, David Stearns will not. He will not put a number on it. He won't say Kodai Senga is set for 140 or Clay Holmes is set for, 160. He won't say it because in his estimation, there is no data to back up if a guy goes over a certain amount of innings that he's going to be at risk for injuries. That's what he's saying. But at the end of the day, I know he's not going to pitch these guys till their arm falls off. It's just not going to happen. That's not the day and age we are. We are in a day and age where there are data and there are analytics to show that when a pitcher throws a certain amount, they become less effective. Maybe they may not become more prone to injury. Maybe they may become more prone to injury. That's a little more, I guess that would be, you would have, again, the data would have to be a little more conclusive for that. But again, I believe guys will become less effective when they are tired. Okay, so that leads to me to believe that we 100% need another starting pitcher. And the guy that was rumored all weekend was Sandy Alcantara. Sandy Alcantara. And Sandy Alcantara, has he had the best year this year? No, he hasn't had the best year. But, he's a guy with a whole crap load of talent. His yearly totals are 5-9, 6.66 ERA. He's got a negative 1.5 WAR. I believe his last start was very good. He pitched 7 innings, allowed 1 run, 4 hits. So a lot better, a lot more effective. But in his last 5 outings, so his last start, he allowed 1 run. Start before that, allowed 4 runs. Start before that, 6 runs. Start before that, 5 runs. Start before that, 7 runs. So out of his last 5 starts, not so good. And if you evaluate the whole year, not so good. So what that tells me is you're not going to give up any top prospects. So let's look at the first trade. The first trade that I heard rumored was Sandy Alcantara for Brandon Sproat and Drew Gilbert. So I'm going to plug that into the baseball trade values. So that's a website, and they assess the values of players when you trade them. So I just want to see where the value they have of Alcantara and what they have the value on Sproat and Drew Gilbert. And then I'm going to give you my feedback. Okay, again, we're going to get to the Mark Vientos trade next. So first, I brought up Sandy Alcantara, and I plugged that in the baseball trade calculator for Brandon Sproat and Drew Gilbert. So the baseball trade calculator gave Sandy Alcantara a value of 12.2, and Brandon Sproat and Drew Gilbert, them together, have a value of 18. So 18 to 12.2. So for a couple reasons, I'm not doing this. So obviously, the baseball trades calculators say that this trade is lopsided, right? This trade is lopsided. So, unfortunately for the Marlins, you're trading Alcantara at basically his low, his all-time low. All right. So from Alcantara, he's coming off of an injury. Thus far, he has been ultra unproductive. Do I want him on the New York Mets? Yes, I do. But I want him at the right price. And to give up a guy like Brandon Sproat with a pretty decent ceiling, he could be a number 2, he could be a number 3. He's got a very live arm, and he's actually been getting a lot better in the last couple weeks, getting those glimpses of last year. So, Sproat has that very decently high ceiling. And if you trade him away, that's 6 years you're losing of a guy, of a pitcher, of a potential top echelon pitcher. Not to mention, you're giving up Drew Gilbert, 6 years of Drew Gilbert, potential center fielder, a guy, a hard-nosed player. Would I want to do a package around Drew Gilbert? Yes. But a guy like Sandy Alcantara right now, the value's not there for Alcantara. The value is not there. He hasn't been Sandy Alcantara for years now. I mean, Sandy Alcantara was dominant, but that was 2022. That was 2022. Even his 2023 campaign, it was 7-12, 4.14. So Sandy Alcantara hasn't been that top guy for 3.5 years now. So do I want to give up a potential top pitching prospect? No, and no. Okay. Now, the good thing about Sandy, here's the good thing about Sandy. So he's making $17.3 million this year. Next year, he's making 17.3 at the age of 30. And you have a team option. So a team option, if you feel he's worth it, you can pay him $21 million in 2027. So if the Mets trade for him, obviously they believe that they could get the best out of him. They believe that they can turn Sandy Alcantara into a very viable starting pitcher, viable to good to great starting pitcher. So I believe the length is very important because you're not going to trade for him if you think he's going to be a 7 ERA guy. You're just not. You're not even going to give up a Drew Gilbert for a guy who has a 7 ERA. Guys who have 7 ERA aren't even major leaguers. But, Sandy Alcantara, he still has the stuff. He's still lighting it up at 100 miles per hour. So if the Mets are going in on this trade, they believe that they could utilize and change, or not change, but they could, I guess, do something mechanically, analytically, fix this guy some way, somehow. But I'm not giving up a top pitching prospect. I am not giving up a top pitching prospect. Let me know. What do you think about that? And I'd build a package around Drew Gilbert and give up another maybe mid-level prospect. That's it. And even if you look at the baseball trade values, that would be a fair trade. That would be a fair trade. All right. Now, let's get to the, I would say, very interesting trade. So the White Sox, actually, they are the ones who are interested, obviously, in moving Luis Roberts. They are the ones interested in moving Luis Roberts. And apparently, according to a couple of writers, Bob Nightingale saw it from him, the White Sox want Mark Vientos in any potential deal involving Luis Roberts. So Bob Nightingale, he had it in his column, his Sunday comment column, and mentioned that the White Sox are seeking to acquire Mark Vientos, who obviously got off to a cold start to the season. He's hit well in the past couple weeks. Vientos is batting 290s. He's got a 732 OPS in his last 31 at-bats. Roberts, on the other hand, has peaked in the month of July, hitting 351 with 2 home runs, 9 RBIs, 982 batting average. 982 OPS in his last 37 at-bats. While this is a small sample size, it is hope for prospective buyers that Roberts can somehow recapture his all-star form with the change of scenery. Okay. And you got to assess the market too, because if you're the New York Mets, how many center fielders are out there? So, you got to put that into play. And then also other factors there. How is Ronnie Mauricio doing? How is Brett Beatty doing? Those would be guys who you would play at third base if you don't get a third baseman back. You're going to be upgrading your center field position. So, it's and then also too, then you look at it like this. Roberts in the last 2 years, I mean, it's really a tough one. It's really a tough one. Now, before I give you my opinion on this trade, let me just plug it into Baseball Trade Values and see what Baseball Trade Values says about this. And just so most of the articles I saw had Mark Vientos as one of the pieces. They actually said that the Mets would most likely have to include a mid-level prospect. So let me plug in a mid-level prospect and Mark Vientos and Luis Roberts, and let me tell you what that value equates to. Okay, so this is where it becomes extremely interesting value-wise. And, baseball trade values, what it'll do is obviously they'll assess the talent level of, said player. Then they see how long the contract is, how much money the player is owed, how much time left on the contract, and then you equate that with the talent that the player has. So there's many factors, if a guy's getting paid little money, if he's got 6 years left on his contract, if he's an all-world player, he's going to have a high surplus value. So the New York Mets, Mark Vientos, has a surplus value of 14, and I included their 20th ranked prospect right now from MLB MLB.com, Christopher Suero, because they said they were looking for a mid-level prospect. Christopher, I believe he could play first base, catcher. His value was 7.3. So that's a value of 21.2. And if you look at Luis Roberts Jr., his value is -1. -1. So according to baseball trade value, if you just included Mark Vientos for Luis Roberts Jr., you're giving up almost 14 times the value that Luis Roberts Jr. is worth. And if you add on an additional prospect that averages 5, 6, 7 points, and that brings the Mets total points to 20, you're giving up 20 to 21 times the value of Luis Roberts Jr. So, a lot of his negative value is due to the fact that Luis Roberts Jr. has been playing extremely bad the last couple years. Very bad the last couple years. Now, some of what would negate this negative value on baseball trade value is the fact that there's not many center fielders out there. I guess you have to also look at, what's the demand for center fielders. So out of the buyers, how many buyers are interested? Like, are there 5 buyers interested in acquiring center fielders and, there's only 2 center fielders available? Or are the Mets and one other team the only buyers, and you have 3 or 4 teams that have center fielders they're willing to trade? Then, even though there's few center fielders available, there's few buyers looking to upgrade that position. So I think that's very interesting, and that's going to be telling. Let's see which teams are willing to upgrade, what's the price, and then you got to look at what's the incremental upgrade. So Cedric Mullins, how much better is Cedric Mullins than Tyrone Taylor? Okay, you think he's a lot better or a little better offensively. Defensively, you think it's about a wash. All right, what chip would you think that upgrade offensively is worth giving up, right? Now, with Luis Roberts Jr., I would say defensively, he's good. Defensively, he's somebody I'd want on my team. But is he that much better than Tyrone Taylor? Is he somebody I want to give up Mark Vientos for? I want to give up on Mark Vientos so that maybe he's a smidge better than Tyrone Taylor out there. I mean, Luis Roberts Jr. a couple years ago was a no-doubter, a no-brainer. You'd give up multiple top prospects for top prospects. And I don't want to take anything away from his glove. He's probably more than a smidge better. He's a former Gold Glove Award winner, and his ceiling is much, much higher than a Tyrone Taylor. But it hasn't been there for the last couple years. I mean, he's batting 206 right now. I said he's having a good last 30 at bats. Even with that, he is batting 206 on the season. So do I want to give up on Mark Vientos? Honestly, I'm telling you, my opinion, I do not. I do not want to give up on a guy who hit the way he hit last year. And not only the way he hit last year, the way he hit in the playoffs. And even if you make the argument that Ronnie Mauricio is a very solid backup, I'm not a solid backup, a solid replacement to play third. Or if you make the argument, we're gonna go get a Eugenio Suarez, and he'll be the third baseman. Still, you're going to have to give up chips for that. So then we're gonna have to look at the trade-off from that. I'm thinking, okay, maybe Mark Vientos is my DH for another 4 or 5 years, and I have value there. And then you got to think about how much you're paying Mark Vientos and compare that to how much we're paying Luis Roberts. And, that's also something to consider, because Roberts is making, despite not making a crazy amount of money, he's making more than Vientos. This year, Roberts is getting paid $15 million. Next year, if the team wants him, $20 million for next year, team option, and $20 million for 2027. And if he stinks this year, if he stinks for these next 2 months, then you gave up Mark Vientos and 4 years of control for 2 months of Luis Roberts for him to stink and for him to be that incremental upgrade defensively over a guy like Tyrone Taylor. So, in my opinion, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. I mean, Mark Vientos is a proven guy, and his offensive breakout. I mean, honestly, also if you assess the situation, it's been fairly normal in MLB history for guys, even top talented guys, to go through sophomore slumps. Mark has had a couple injuries too this season, so I'm way not ready to give up on a Mark Vientos, especially from what I saw him do in crunch time in the playoffs last year. I'm certainly not. And I like the fact that we are building there's a lot of homegrown players, and they mentioned it on the ESPN broadcast today. I mean, you look around the diamond, even, whether you have Acuna, Beatty at second base, those are both homegrown. Just Lindor and Soto really are not, if, well, depends if Marte's out there. But I mean, you got a lot of homegrown guys in this lineup on this team. And I like that. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the youth. I'm a big fan of building around Alvarez, Mauricio, Beatty. I mean, if you got to include a guy, Beatty and Acuna, I'd much rather include those two. Acuna probably would be the guy, but, again, what's his value right now? But even so, baseball trade values probably have to have him higher than Luis Roberts, who's a .9, negative .9, which is a -1. Let me see what Acuna's value is. So Acuna's value, Acuna would be well more in terms of value. His value is 6.4. 6.4. He's 22 years old. So, I mean, if you wanted to build a trade around him, that would make a little more sense to me. Get a center fielder. Even if you wanted to include a mid-level prospect, it would have to be the right prospect. I'm not a big fan of of trading away any future star pitchers. And even one thing I want to bring up. So if you look at the Mets top their top 30, or their top prospects. All right, so the Mets top prospects, like I mentioned, they have three pitchers in the top five: Jonah Tong, Nolan McLean, and Brandon Sproat. Right. So those guys, obviously, I don't want to trade. But also, I don't want to trade guys who next year will be in that top 10, pitchers who will be elevated. Like last year, if you would have looked at Jonah Tong, I think he was ranked 20 in the beginning of last year. Then he started elevating himself up the ranks. So that's also something, obviously David Stearns is 100% aware of. But, teams who like the Mets farm system, they're going to be looking for, all right, you don't want to trade a Jonah Tong? All right, who's a year away from being the next Jonah Tong? That's who I want. So obviously, I want to avoid trading those players as well. All right, folks, let me know what you think. But at the end of the day, we gotta feel happy. We really gotta feel happy. And again, I think back to years ago. They're like, the Mets have always struggled to be consistently good. And last year we made a run. This year, hopefully, God willing, we make the playoffs. We win a World Series. But the fact that we have a good competitive team and we're going to be good competitive for a couple consecutive years, that doesn't happen many times. I think only two other times in Mets history that we made the playoffs 2 consecutive years. I mean, that is crazy. That is crazy. Since 1962, only two other occasions that we made the playoffs 2 consecutive years. So, when the Mets are good, they usually don't string it together. They certainly don't. So, the good thing about the Mets, they have an architect, David Stearns, who is building. He's got a plan. He's building. I mean, he's done a great job. Did a great job in Milwaukee. Keep going to mention this. Milwaukee, great team right now. Milwaukee's farm system, they are ranked in the top 3. Most publications have that farm system in the top 3. Mets right now are building. their team right now, or their farm system, is building depth in there, and they are building talent from the pitchers. I mean, that was the thing when Steve Cohen took over this team around 2020. We wanted to load the farm system with pitchers. Since then, how many pitchers came through the farm system since 2020? I mean, we just did not do a great job developing our pitchers. And David Stearns, the thing that we obviously loved about him is he was very known for the pitching lab, and he was known for developing pitchers. And that's what I'm excited about. I'm super excited about. But another thing I'm super excited about is this is the first time we're going to see the aggressive side of David Stearns. In fact, my estimation, in the year and a half that David Stearns has been here, the Gregory Soto move was the most aggressive move by Mr. David Stearns. Juan Soto, that signing, Steve Cohen, 100% Steve Cohen. Everybody knows it. That was Steve Cohen, and Steve Cohen some more. But this was the most aggressive move, getting a guy with a higher ceiling. Getting a guy with a higher ceiling in Gregory Soto, getting a fireballer who's got that sinker, that got that, wipeout 100-mile-per-hour pitch. And I really liked hearing from Gregory Soto in the, when he came over here and saying that when he played the Mets, he actually tried to up his game because he wanted to be traded to the Mets. That's something 10 years ago you would never hear. Never hear. Remember Stroman? I mean, Stroman's got his, thing. But remember when he was traded to the Mets? It was like, I think he was like throwing stuff in the clubhouse. It's how times have changed. And Jazz Chisholm, they asked him about Soto, and he was like, "Oh my God, I thought we were going to trade from him." In fact, they asked Jazz Chisholm because he was 0 for 10, and basically Soto completely dominated him. And don't fool yourself. This Gregory Soto was very, very desirable player, and many teams were in on him. You had Stearns, very aggressive. The Mets knew their position. They knew they were buyers. They knew this is what they wanted to do for a very long time. Since AJ Minter went down, since the Mets lost a couple of their soft-tossing lefties early in the season, they knew that they had to get this guy. AJ Minter, such a huge addition. The Mets knew they needed a hard-throwing lefty to complement some of their soft-throwing lefties, and to replace their soft-throwing lefties, they got another soft-throwing lefty, Brooks Raley, a guy with more talent. I like Brooks, but you complement him with a Gregory Soto. That is beautiful. That is perfect. And again, like Keith Hernandez says, the circle of trust is growing out there in that bullpen. How could you not be happy? How could you not be happy? I mean, like right now, obviously the Mets got Diaz, they got Soto, Reed Garrett, Budo. Budo, I think he's got a level that he can finally turn it to. He's a little more healthy. Brooks Raley, obviously, Brazabon, Rico Garcia a couple of days ago. Very nice pitching. I know Stanix, he's outside the circle, but I believe, he's still got something left. And also, I think right now, this is a perfect time for competition because the Mets are rumored to be adding bullpen help. They're rumored to potentially be adding center fielder and adding another bat. So this is the perfect time for Ronnie Mauricio to step on the gas saying, I don't want to be traded. I want to be here long term. I am a solution. Guys like Brett Beatty, this is their time to prove they're a solution. Mark Vientos, this is his time. Again, he's had time, but, right now, this is where teams are going to be looking at you. Mets are going to be making these final evaluations. It's good to see these players step it up when it's a pivotal time and wanting to be here. You see that in the pen as well. A good inning from Stanek, couple good innings from Rico Garcia the other day. Budo, a nice clean inning from him. So you see even guys in the bullpen saying, hey, they don't want to lose their job. They want to be here as well. And for the Mets, it's just adding as the more and more guys play to their capabilities, to their level of play. You have more talent on your roster. You have more chips, gives you more options. And I think this is a really feel good time for this team. But I also think that, again, we still have to thread the needle. No stupid trades. I'm confident that David Stearns will not make stupid trades. Last year, if you go back to my trades video, I analyzed every single trade. The Blackburn trade did not like. I love the Winker trade because of what it really kind of signified, that type of gritty type of player. I like that attitude. I like what it brought. Are we going to get like, a type of player like that? Well, let's see. Are we going to get it's, I think we're going all in. I think the aggressive nature of the Soto trade indicated, really signified that we are going to be all in and we are going to take an aggressive approach to this trade deadline. All right, folks. Again, let me know your opinions on the few trades we went over. Let me know your opinions on how the Mets are playing right now. I think we are in good shape, but I always would love to hear what you think. Again, I gotta keep thanking you. I really appreciate all of the great comments over the years, the feedback. You guys are great. Again, I cannot say thank you enough. I really, really can't. Well, have a great day. Enjoy the next couple of days. This is always the most enjoyable time of one of the most enjoyable times of the MLB season for me. I love the trade deadline stuff. I really do. I think it brings me back to years ago. Listening to the radio and trying to figure out who's going where. All night. I don't know. It just brings back a good feeling, good memories. So that's me. Well, thank you so much again. I will speak to everybody very, very soon. Have a great day. Hopefully, I don't miss up this video. If you watched it right, if you're watching to this point, I'll tell you a little inside thing. Accidentally, I did a video last time. I think it was around 9 minutes. Usually, I don't put 9-minute videos out. Well, I didn't put out a 9-minute video. It was a 35-minute video. Accidentally cut off the majority of the video. So, I'm like posting this and I'm like, I'm actually like re-listening. I'm like, why is this cutting off over here? Oops, I made a mistake, but it happens. All right, folks, I will talk to everybody soon.